Hey everybody, I'm Dave with Growing the Home Garden. Today I'm going to go over to my birch tree and I'm going to try to take some cuttings from it. It's been a little while since I've done that before. It's been several years, but I'll post a link in the comments to the blog post I did on actually taking cuttings from birch trees. And there's a certain time of year that's really good for it, which is right now. We're here kind of toward June, and you're looking for a certain type of a cutting, and I'll show you some of that here in this video. First though, I'm getting a jar and I'm going to fill it with some water so that while I'm taking the cuttings, I can put them in this jar of water so they don't dry out. So you can see here, this is the birch tree that I'll be taking cuttings from. It's one of two that I have in the yard, and it's kind of overgrowing on my kid's swing set, which admittedly has seen better days. We've had a series of woodpeckers and carpenter bees that have just destroyed it, so it's off limits for now. We're going to take it down and put up a new one, but that's not why you're here. So we're going to take a look at this cutting material that we've got. Now some of this is good and some of this is not really usable for us. This part right here is good. You see right here, this is new growth. Here's old growth right here. We don't want that. This is new growth starting from right there. Hopefully you can see the color difference between those. See a more mature bark on this one. And this is all good material right here up to around this area. This tip area is not going to be good for us. So we're actually going to take this section here and use it. And we're going to look for similar sections throughout the foliage on this tree. And that's one reason, before I cut this all back and move it back here, I want to get some cuttings and see if I can create some more birch trees for later. See, and this is one of two birch trees that we've got in the yard, and I just love them for the bark and how it all looks. The one problem that they do have is they like to drop a lot of limbs, and so you'll be cleaning them up quite often if you choose to have birch trees, but they do make a very good water tolerant tree. So if you have a creek side or an area that needs something to help with drainage, birch trees are an excellent selection to use for that. Heritage is a really good version of it. These are just the simple river birch, Betula nigra, and so no cultivar name or anything like that for them. But I planted these when they were little saplings, and they are humongous, probably about 40 foot tall right now. So when taking the cutting, I'm going to come here, I'm going to leave just a little bit of this stuff, but I'm going to trim on this side of the node. See that right here? I'm going to make a snip. Okay, and that's the piece that I'm going to want to keep. So this other part I'm going to remove probably from right about there. Sorry, get my fingers in the camera. And there you go. That is the cutting that I'm going to have. That is probably about an 8-inch, 9-inch, 10-inch or so cutting. And I'm going to strip all the leaves off. But first I'm going to just shove it in my water, and I'll do all the rest of this stuff here in a few minutes. And I'm going to move this out of the sun so it does not get too much water loss. I wanted to show you the difference in the wood that I cut off. This here is not something that I'm going to keep. This is going to be disposed of. And you notice how green that is, and it's pretty thin. And especially like over here toward the tip, it's all new growth. And that is not going to reliably root for me. It's going to get too much water loss, and then the tree will try to compensate for that, and it's just going to try to keep growing. So this I'm removing and getting rid of. This other piece though is really good. It's kind of firm. It flexes back into space really well. And I'm going to remove all the lower leaves off of this to use for my cutting. I'll leave that top one up here so it has something, but the rest of them are going to be removed. So here's that same cutting with the leaves removed. I just pulled them off gently. They will just kind of snap right off. Now here at the bottom, you'll notice that there is a node. I'm trying to get that focused here for you. Yeah, there it goes. Okay, so that is the node right there, and you can see a little bit of a bud right there where a leaf was. I'm going to make a scrape on the opposite side right here to give it a little bit more room to create what you call calluses. And calluses are kind of where the wound is healing, and that's where a lot of the roots like to form. So here you can see I've wounded the end of the cutting just a little bit. I just gave it a scrape with that pruner. It's kind of a rough cut. And then on the other side, I left that bud alone because there are some auxins and things like that that are going to be in there. And we're going to come over here to the little jar that's got my rooting hormone in it. We're going to dip it in there, and then we're going to stick it in this pot here, which is, I've got peat in the very bottom, and then I've got wood chips up on the top area. And I'm going to sink it in until it kind of touches about the top of the peat layer. I don't want it to go all the way down because I don't want it to be soaking in water. But you know, birches are pretty good with water, so it probably wouldn't be a problem if I did that anyway. But for right now, I'm just going to keep it, and it will probably go about that deep into this pot. And it'll be nice and firm. It'll have several buds that are under the soil that could possibly generate roots. So you can see here that I've dusted the cut end of that cutting with rooting hormone. And that rooting hormone can pretty much be purchased at any of your local box stores or gardening centers. They pretty much all sell it. Just a standard kind of thing. Or you can get it off Amazon if you want, whatever. But with this here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it in the soil a few nodes down, and that's going to do it, just like this. I'm going to go on and do the next few cuttings, and then after I'm all done, I'm going to water them in and then firm up the area around it really good so that they've got lots of contact with the stem and the soil medium that we're using. So here you can see the cuttings all stuck into their pot. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to firm up around the bottom and try to make sure that there's good contact between the soil medium and the cuttings themselves. That will help them to generate roots and just keeps them in place. Now, one issue I've been having, which is something that I haven't really had to deal with too much in the past before, but I've had squirrels and chipmunks that keep wanting to come in here and go after things. So I'm hoping that they don't come in here and try to dig this up. I may have to do something to help protect the cuttings, like put a little bit of a wire cage around this to keep them from getting in there. But they've ruined quite a few things this year in looking for their stuff. So I'm going to leave it in this tray, which is a 1020 tray that will actually collect some water in it and keep some moisture in there. We don't want so much that perhaps like mosquitoes will start to grow, but we don't want it to dry out too quick, and we want these to be able to soak up plenty of water when they need it. And that's the biggest problem with cuttings. And the most damaging thing is when you let a cutting actually dry out, and they just generally don't come back from that. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and water this, and I'm going to set it under a shade tree, and I'll just make sure I keep it watered. I'll keep the tray underneath it and keep plenty of moisture around it. And it could take 2 to 3 months before we actually see some roots. Now, when we do see roots, we're not going to want to disturb them. We're going to want to leave them in this pot until probably next spring. And the good baseline is to start seeing roots come out the very bottom of the pot. Because if they're not coming out of the bottom of the pot, and the cuttings are still alive, they may still need to generate more roots before they can actually survive on their own. So the less disturbance, the better. But we'll see what we can do about actually showing what roots are forming, because I know everybody likes to see that kind of thing. But take a look at the article that I wrote several years ago about birch cuttings. That's another one that I did many years ago. But it's in the comments, or not the comments, the description. Go check out the description, and you can head over there and read that article if you want to see more about rooting a birch tree. So I'm Dave with Growing the Home Garden. Hope you enjoyed this little video on birch tree cuttings. If you would, hit the like button and subscribe. That really helps me out here on this channel. And check out that article. If you enjoy it too, feel free to share. But thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.